So our next panel will be discussing if I can say it correctly, food sustainability from farm to table. Leading the conversation is Noramay Cadena, who is a managing partner at Supply Chain Capital. Supply Chain Capital is a venture firm who believes in a future of food that is sustainability mindful, supply chain efficient, better for you, and culture rich. We would love to hear more about you, Noramay, and we'll let you take the conversation from here.
Thank you, Denny. Welcome, everyone. Today we're really talking about we're talking about positive transformation in food and agriculture for a more sustainable future, and it really is relevant to the work we do at Supply Chain Capital, which is a firm that kicked off this year, investing in the future of food and tech with a lens for culture and diversity.
Noramay, sorry to interrupt. Can you just speak a tiny bit louder? Just a little bit. You sound a little bit quiet.
Does that work? Is that better?
A little bit better.
Testing.
Okay, wait, say something again.
Testing.
Okay, that sounds a little better. Thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you for letting me know. Supply Chain Capital launched last year with a mission to invest in food and food tech from a culture and diversity perspective. And so that is my lens today as we talk about this intersection of sustainability, supply chain, and food and ag tech. And I'd love to welcome the panelists and have them introduce themselves. I'll start with Britt from Stonyfield Farms, please.
Hi, thanks so much, Noramay. I'm Britt Lundgren. I lead Stonyfield's work on sustainable agriculture. So that means I do a combination of government affairs and agricultural sustainability. And I've been with the business here in New Hampshire for a little over a decade now. I have a background in policy, and I am passionate about advancing agriculture as a solution for climate change. Happy to be here. Thank you.
And we'll go to Emily, please.
Hi there, thanks for having me. So my name's Emily Lafferty. I work for Simple Mills, a food company based in Chicago who's really looking to pioneer the way that we eat. And so in my role in leading strategic sourcing and working on our regenerative agriculture initiatives within our products, I'm thinking about how we design our products and source our ingredients to ultimately support all of the work that we're talking about today. Thank you.
Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Gonzales, and I'm a beekeeper and also owner of Happy Organics. We're a wellness company that sells things to help people with things like stress, anxiety, sleeplessness, and pain relief. And I also work with the farmers where we pollinate to restore native habitats to support our bees and also native pollinator populations. And before this work, I was co-founder and CTO of an ag tech company in Salinas, California.
I wanted to raise my hand for all of those. And lastly, Chad, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chad Stelter, and I work for Flagstone Foods. And what we are a manufacturer of private label snack nuts and trail mixes, headquartered here in Minneapolis. I'm a 20-year veteran of the food industry and grew up on a farm in Southwest Minnesota. And so this topic is very near and dear to my heart as we think about sustainability, certainly bee health. And we as an organization are extremely committed to sustainability. Really excited about some of the initiatives that we have going on, from recyclable packaging to our healthy bees our healthy bees, happy snackers initiative. And so excited to be here today.
Thank you for that lens, Chad. And in fact, it's exactly where I want to get started on the supply chain side. So let's talk about this IPCC report and supply chain innovations that are required to curb agriculture-related emissions. And I'll direct this question to Emily and Britt. So kick us off here. What are the critical supply chain innovations required to curb agriculture-related emissions in
Yeah.
light of this latest IPCC report?
Yeah, I think it's important to touch on ultimately what one of those solutions is. And there's really a lot of optimism around farmers and ultimately some of the practices that farmers can and are adopting to ultimately sequester carbon, to increase biodiversity above and below ground, including with beneficial pollinators like bees, and ultimately restore economic resiliency in their communities as well. And so thinking about those critical supply chain innovations, it's critical to include farmers in that discussion and within that realm. And so thinking about what is the solution, those solutions have to include incentives and reduce risk for farmers to increase adoption of practices, ultimately benefiting soil health and biodiversity. Everything to the measurements and driving impact through those measurements, thinking about farm level practices, so animal integration, cover crops, how can we scale these practices at a level that ultimately commercial agriculture requires. And then thinking about ecosystem services markets and measurements, making sure that there are incentives for farmers to capture some of those monetary rewards and ecosystem services. And so that's through more sophisticated accounting measures.
Noramay, you mentioned the IPCC report that just came out, and obviously it was, I think very sobering, and for those of us who've been working in this space for a long time, not surprising, right? There wasn't anything particularly new about this report, but it really reinforced the urgency around taking action. And at Stonyfield, we have been looking for a long time at how we can reduce emissions from the farms that we source from, because we know that it accounts for over half of our total company's greenhouse gas footprint. And one of the things that has become really evident to us is the need for a range of tools that are appropriate for farms of different types and sizes. So you see technologies being developed like precision agriculture, which is really only applicable to a very small slice of very large farms. And if we are going to take advantage of the opportunity to take agriculture, which globally represents 25% of emissions today, and turn it into a climate solution, which is actually possible. Agriculture could become a sink for greenhouse gas emissions. We need to enlist every farmer that we can in that effort. We can't just focus on the biggest farms or the farms that are tied to corporate supply chain sustainability initiatives. We need to have a variety of tools that are efficient to use and appealing to use for the full spectrum of agriculture. And paired with that, we need much better and more robust old-fashioned technical assistance. We need people who are trained to go out and give farmers advice on the changes that they can make on their operation. And here in the US, our technical assistance network has really fallen away over the years, and it's really time to reinvest in that as a nation so that we can really help farmers become part of the solution.
I love that you talked about urgency. You know, I actually remember reading a Forbes article after the IPCC report, and it was titled something like, you know, IPCC report predicts disaster yet again, but not much will happen yet again. And so it talked about the ambivalence of the general public. And so I really want to move to, you both gave great examples of how your companies are playing here. I'd love to hear from Chad and Jessica. You know, give us concrete examples of how your companies are playing in this space. And then maybe if it applies to the work you do, what role does public policy play?
I guess I'll go first. So I mentioned this briefly in my intro, but I'm working with the farms where our bees are pollinating to restore native habitats to support both our bees and native pollinators. Because our apiaries are treatment-free, we rely on the health of the environment for our bees to thrive. So it's really critical for the survival of our honeybees to take these steps. And I guess the role that public policy plays is really funding these projects, because there's not a lot of support for small farmers through like subsidies or grants. You know, you usually have to like fit a certain size to get, you know, these to qualify for these grants. And I work directly with farms that are, you know, a couple of acres. And I've also seen that these are the people that are really doing the work to convert their farms, or even starting their farms off as regenerative, and really caring about the produce that they're directly providing to their communities.
Yeah, and from the Flagstone food side, so one of the opportunities that we saw, we are one of the largest procurer of snack nuts for the private label space. So we work with large retailers all across the US, and we saw an opportunity for somebody with our scale to really step in and make a difference and be a leader on the private label side. And so in June of this year, we announced our commitment to procure 100% of our almonds from bee-friendly farms by 2025. And as part of that, you know, certainly looking at the sourcing element, working with our growers. And so you had heard from Allison from Pomona Farming earlier. And so we've partnered with Pomona really to be one of several of our main suppliers in terms of meeting this initiative. And I know they've got a number of great initiatives going on their farms. And so we've looked at that partnership as an opportunity to go forward, but then also working with folks like Danielle at Project Apis M, and really being able to give back from a contribution perspective. And so right now we will be giving back a portion of sales to their Seeds for Bees program, and really helping again the growers as well as the bees within that initiative. But then the other part that we saw is the more we got into this is just the education factor. And so the opportunity for us to continue to educate consumers. And so on pack, we're making it easy for them to simply scan a QR code so they can go out to a website, learn more about some of the challenges with the bees, about our partnership, and even what they can do at home with some simple, pollinator gardens in their backyard. So really excited about what we can do to make a difference within this topic. So.
Okay, let's dive a little deeper on this public and private collaborations and how these can be successful in the sustainable food space. I'll leave it open, but share an example that you think is working well. Public-private collaborations.
I'd love to jump in on this. At Stonyfield, we helped to launch a project called Open Team, which stands for Open Technology Ecosystem for Agriculture Management. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been really focused on developing scale appropriate technologies that our producers can work with. And one of the things that we've encountered is that there's a lot of interesting tools out there that support farmers in measuring and monitoring greenhouse gas emissions at the farm level and soil health at the farm level, but those tools don't talk to each other. And as a result, it becomes very labor intensive to move your information from one tool to another, say from measuring things on the farm to modeling emissions in a supply chain context. And Open Team, through the Wolfsnack Center for Agriculture and the Environment, is bringing together over 50 researchers, software developers, and research-oriented farms to bring these tools together into an open source platform so that we can exchange data and really allow farmers to maximize the use of data on their farms so that they can get the most out of their record keeping and monitoring activities. And this work was made possible because of a public-private partnership. The Farm Bill funds, the federal Farm Bill funds this organization called the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. and they provided half of the initial funding, the initial $10 million that has supported the launch of Open Team. And since we have begun this work, where Open Team is now working closely with the US Department of Agriculture to create interoperability between the tools that are part of Open Team's platform and the tools that USDA is using to monitor soil health and to measure greenhouse gas emissions. So we're really excited about the potential that bringing USDA in brings, because it allows farmers who go to USDA for support to be able to really leverage their information about their farm in other tools, as long as they're a part of that open source platform.
Anyone else on public-private collaborations?
Yeah, I guess I'll just make a quick comment because I noticed I grew up in the Central Valley and it's all agriculture here. And I found it pretty ironic once I moved back from the Bay Area that it was so hard to find fresh local food when you're like right next to a farm. And so just looking, at what currently exists, it's not an innovation, but I definitely think there needs to be innovation around it. Is farmers markets and food banks. Farmers markets here, I think in Merced only 2 exist. And, I think it's, we just opened one in South Merced where it's, it's a low income area and it's hard, there's no grocery stores in this area. So I think it was really like crucial for us to start that here. And it seemed so strange to me that there wasn't one already. And also food banks for reducing food waste, because our family, I know, donates a lot of produce that they're not able to sell to those food banks. And I feel like a lot of times, those 2 things could just really help with sustainability and giving people food directly from farms to their table.
The irony of a fruit and produce desert in an agricultural region. I hear you. So I'd love to get a little more personal and have you really share some of your personal motivations in relation to sustainability work. What really gets you out of bed in the morning as you think about this intersection of food and sustainability and climate?
I think circling back to really the optimism that farmers bring and are so critical for in our food system, what's really motivating for me and Simple Mills as a food manufacturer is really being that node between farmers and ultimately consumers that drive demand for diverse crops and are continuing to increasingly put pressure on the rest of us in the value chain for the right reasons to do this work. And so, we know that we can really vote 3 or more times a day with the food choices that we make. And as a food manufacturer, we can help support at a micro level, consumers making that everyday decision, support that work all the way to the farm level and sourcing crops from farmers that are adopting these practices and ultimately driving demand for diverse crops that have therefore supported climate resiliencies, pest resiliencies, providing diverse food sources for pollinators, bees. So serving as that critical node in the value chain is really motivating.
Chad, what is motivating? And you're muted, Chad. Don't leave us hanging. We want to know. No, not yet. Anyone else want to go while Chad works this out?
I can go. So I'd say for me, it's working directly with Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the space, because ultimately it will affect our communities the hardest, and it has been already. So that's really inspiring for me. And also, I'm a 3rd generation beekeeper. My dad was a beekeeper, my grandpa was a beekeeper. So it's really important for me to be able to pass these skills down, or have a world where I can pass these skills down.
All right, can you hear me now? All
Woohoo.
right.
Make it count.
It may sound cliche, but again, it's looking at the entire supply chain. There is an abundance of opportunity to make improvements from a sustainability perspective. Certainly as we look at who, again, that we source our raw materials from, thinking about the packaging that we put the food in. We've got several initiatives right now around recyclable packaging and really trying to lead that on the private label side of the business and really help, because we work with a number of retailers too that they have their initiatives around sustainability, and we view it as an opportunity for us to not only make our mark as a manufacturer with sustainability, but help them achieve their goals as well. And so really there's just an abundance of opportunity throughout, again, going from the farm to the table in terms of how we can approach this. And so, we're just excited about the opportunities themselves. So.
Britt, how about you?
I am really motivated by the opportunity around soil health. We know that if every farm around the world were to begin improving soil health and increasing carbon that's sequestered in their soil at a rate of 0.04% annually, so that's 4 parts per thousand, that we could actually get to a place where agriculture was net neutral or even sequestering more carbon than it emits. And that in and of itself is exciting, but the really cool thing about working on soil health is that there's no downside to it. When farmers improve soil health, it also creates benefits for water quality because soil becomes better at retaining nutrients and absorbing heavy rainfall. And it also helps farmers improve yield and improve their overall resilience. So even if we were totally wrong about these climate benefits, we would still be making steps towards agriculture that was going to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change in the future.
Love it. I personally resonate with many of these motivations to get out of bed in the morning. Our fund is really focused on this intersection of food, culture, and tech, and so we think a lot about new to the U.S. sustainable ingredient technology and supply chain technology from farm to fork or farm to table, like Chad says, and CPG brands that have cultural appeal, because we do think that the multicultural American will be demanding ingredients that are more whole and sustainable and ethically sourced. So I am right there with you, getting out of bed in the morning and getting a jump start on this work. So as we approach the last 5 minutes, I want to be sure that we're all sharing some advice with consumers. So think about, we've talked about some innovations that can have a big impact and some that don't necessarily have the biggest impact. So let's think about consumers who want to be more sustainable. What are some practices or products that can have a pretty big impact? What do you recommend for people who want to be more sustainable? Anyone can go.
I think one great place to start is by choosing organic where it can fit into your budget. We know that organic soils sequester 26% more carbon on average over the long term than conventional soils. So again, getting back to that potential climate benefit, choosing organic helps more farmers to choose to produce organically and helps them become a part of that soil solution.
Emily.
Yeah, I would just kind of build on what I said earlier around, making food choices and putting pressure on food manufacturers, asking questions about transparency and traceability, and educating and engaging each other in this work. So the everyday consumer is thinking more intentionally about what products they're buying, what foods and crops that they're ultimately consuming, where they're coming from, and understanding more of the farmer's perspective and what's happening at the farm level. And that's, again, going to be possible through food manufacturers and producers directly in some cases. So just continuing to educate ourselves as individual consumers.
Yep, and as you know, a manufacturer thinking about that exact aspect, right, of how do we educate those consumers and make it easy for them. And so again, whether it's a QR code on package, you know, something that they can leverage their smartphone and make it easy for them to get information so they can make those informed decisions. So, you know, as a manufacturer and a marketer, you know, those are some of the things that we're thinking about too, of how do we make it easy to get that information for consumers.
What about a call to action for those folks tuning in? What is a company, or sorry, what is a category or process in the food, bev, or ag space that is ripe for innovation right now?
I would just comment that, you know, Simple Mills, we have an in-house R&D team, and so we're constantly looking at, call it rarer or more diverse crops in many forms, whether it's flours, oils, etc. And you know, how we make these ingredients coming from more diverse crops, more ecologically beneficial crops, palatable to a more conventional consumer is going to be increasingly important. You know, we all are familiar with retailers and food companies that are on, call it the cutting edge of this work, but really we need the critical mass to solve these problems that the recent report was talking about. And so, you know, call to action would be, you know, processing capabilities that ultimately make crops more palatable and functional and manufacturable ingredients. And we're working, co-creating programs with a lot of folks upstream in the value chain to do that, but technologies that support that work.
I would add that we see a big need for innovation in sustainable packaging and in end-of-life solutions for packaging. We've all seen the news reports about how recycling systems are breaking down and not always really functioning at all. And yet, you know, we know that folks need food in a variety of spaces, in a variety of places. We need to put food into packaging to get it to people. And how can we do that in a way that's going to be more sustainable in the long run is still a question that really has a lot of space to be solved.
All right, any others? Okay, Denise. I think that's a wrap for this panel. Thank you all for joining us for this chat on food sustainability from farm to table. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thanks, Noramay. That was great.